Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down complex topics using the original source material. Today, we're diving into a single legal case that has, for over 3 decades, completely shaped India's affirmative action policies.
Okay, let's jump right in with this number, 50%. This number is right at the heart of one of the most significant and debated legal rulings in modern Indian history. You can think of it as a line in the sand, a really delicate balancing act that affects millions and millions of lives.
So, where does this number come from? It all goes back to this case. Officially, it's Indra Sawhney versus the Union of India, but you'll often hear it called the Mandal Commission case. This was back in 1992, and it was the moment the Supreme Court finally tackled the incredibly contentious issue of reservations, or affirmative action, for a group known as other backward classes, the OBCs.
Now, this was such a huge deal that a special 9-judge bench was brought in to decide it. Their final verdict rested on 4 crucial pillars that would pretty much define reservation policy for decades to come. Now, they did uphold the 27% quota for OBCs, but the truly game-changing decisions were these 3. They introduced a 50% cap on all reservations, they created this concept of a creamy layer, and they limited reservations to just the initial hiring stage. Let's break those down.
Okay. Let's start with that first major innovation, the 50% ceiling. This is where the court drew that line in the sand and set a very clear, very explicit limit on just how much reservation could be given out.
And the court was incredibly precise about this. What they said was, in any given year, the total number of reserved spots, and that's for all groups combined, could not go over the 50% mark. You see, this was a deliberate attempt to find a balance, right? A balance between social justice on one hand and the principle of general merit on the other, making sure one didn't completely cancel out the other.
And you can see that intent really clearly here. The whole point was to guarantee that at least half of all opportunities, whether we're talking about college admissions or government jobs, would stay open for competition based on merit alone. That means they're accessible to every single citizen, no matter their background.
All right, on to the second major outcome. This one builds on that very same idea of balance and fairness. The court introduced a totally new idea into India's reservation system, something they called the creamy layer. So what does that mean? Well, essentially, the court said that even within a backward class, if some members have reached a certain level of social and economic success, this so-called creamy layer, then they shouldn't get reservation benefits anymore. The logic was simple. They don't need the support, and if they take those spots, the benefits won't reach the people who are still struggling the most.
And this right here is the core of that idea. The court's message was unmistakable. Affirmative action has to reach the people who genuinely need it. The goal wasn't to create a new privileged class within a reserved group, but to make sure the benefits were flowing to the people who were truly at a disadvantage.
Now for the third key ruling. This one made a really important distinction. It wasn't about who gets reservation, but when they get it. And this was all about government jobs and moving up the career ladder.
And this really gets to the heart of how the court saw this issue. Reservation, they argued, is meant to be a foot in the door. It's a way to correct historical disadvantages right at the entry point. But, they said, once someone is in the system, any step up, any promotion has to be based on merit, not reservation.
So, a case from 1992, that was a long time ago. Why does it still matter so much today? Why are we even talking about it? Well, because its impact on Indian society and law has been massive and incredibly long-lasting.
You see, this wasn't just some one-off decision. The principles they laid down in 92, that 50% ceiling and the creamy layer rule, they literally became the fundamental rulebook, the blueprint for India's entire affirmative action system for all the years that followed.
And that's really the bottom line here. Every single debate, every new policy, every legal fight about reservation in India today happens in the shadow of this one single landmark judgment. It is the legal bedrock everything else is built on.
So that leaves us with a final, big question to think about. Society, the economy, our social structures, they've all changed so much since 1992. So you have to ask, how does a legal framework from back then continue to work with the brand new challenges, the new demands, and all the complexities of India today?